Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a case that you've probably heard of, one of America's most famous, most baffling puzzles, the JonBenét Ramsey case. You see, the thing about this mystery is that it's just drowning in evidence, but somehow completely unsolved. So we're going to go straight to the source, the original case files, to try and figure out why. All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start right at the beginning with that infamous ransom note and the scene itself. Then we'll step inside those really tense police interviews. After that, we'll get into the bombshell DNA evidence and see how this whole thing just exploded into a public fight. And we'll wrap up by looking at the big contradictions that have left this case completely frozen in time. And that right there, that's the central problem, isn't it? It's the core paradox of this whole case. So to try and get our heads around it, we're going straight to the source material. We're talking police reports, the actual interview transcripts, legal documents. We're going to see with our own eyes how the evidence itself is what created these huge contradictions that have kept people arguing for decades.
Okay, so let's start right where the investigation did. We have to look at the two most critical pieces of evidence from those first few hours. That bizarre, super long, 3-page ransom note, and just the state of the Ramsey house itself. Right from the get-go, with the very first piece of evidence, there's a major conflict. You've got a 1997 police warrant where it says their analysis showed indications, their word, that Patsy Ramsey might have written that note. But then, on the other side, the Ramseys are saying, no way. They had their own team of experts, even involving the Secret Service, who they say completely cleared them. So the investigation starts with the evidence pointing in two totally opposite directions, a huge problem. Now, this single line right here from an early search warrant, it's absolutely crucial. No signs of forced entry. Think about what that means. For the police, this shaped their entire investigation from that moment on. If no one broke in, then the killer had to be someone already inside the house. That became their working theory, and it was a powerful one. But, and this is a huge but, this is where things get really complicated. You fast forward to his 1998 police interview, and John Ramsey describes something different. He talks about going into this basement room and finding a window open, cracked open, with a pane of glass broken out. And what's more, there was a suitcase sitting right under it. I mean, that sounds a lot like a plausible way for someone to get in, right? And it directly contradicts that official no forced entry story. So that conflict between the Ramseys and the police, it only got worse inside the interview room. When you actually read the official transcripts, you can just feel it. The air is thick with suspicion, with distrust, and you can see this careful legal game being played by both sides. Just listen to this quote from the family's attorney, Lynn Wood. It tells you everything about how tense things got. He's basically saying, hey, Patsy Ramsey isn't on trial here for you lawyers to cross-examine. He's drawing a line in the sand. This wasn't a friendly, cooperative interview anymore. It was a full-on adversarial battle between two legal teams. So when investigators are pressing Patsy for details, specifically in her 2000 interview, something starts to happen. A very distinct and, frankly, controversial pattern begins to emerge in the ways she answers their question. You know, again and again in these interviews, when they ask her for specific details about that night, things like, what was the sequence of events, she'd say, I don't remember the course of events, really. Or they'd ask, what shoes were you wearing? And she'd say, I can't remember the shoes. Over and over, her response was some version of, I don't know. Now, for the investigators, this was a huge red flag. But for her defenders, this was a classic, clear sign of trauma. No matter which way you look at it, it was just another brick wall in the investigation. And then there's the pineapple. This was another huge point of contention. The autopsy found pineapple in JonBenet's system, which suggests she'd eaten pretty shortly before she died. But here's the thing. In his 98 interview, John Ramsey is absolutely adamant. He says, I will guarantee you she was sound asleep when they got home and never woke up to eat. So where did the pineapple come from? It's another one of these factual mysteries that just doesn't add up. So you have the interviews, and they're just creating more questions than answers, right? You'd think, okay, Forensic science, that's where we'll get some clarity. Well, instead of clarity, the science uncovered a clue that was about to change absolutely everything. Okay, so with all these theories flying around, all the accusations, what did the hard, physical, scientific evidence actually say? What did the forensics uncover?
Well, the central scientific mystery of this case is spelled out right here in these lab reports. DNA from an unknown male was found on JonBenét's clothing, on her underwear waistband and her long johns. And here's the critical part. That DNA profile didn't match anyone in the Ramsey family, not a single one. And it didn't match anyone in the national DNA database either.
This DNA evidence became so powerful, so significant, that in 2008, the Boulder District Attorney at the time, Mary Lacey, she wrote this official letter of apology directly to John Ramsey. In it, she says the new evidence has vindicated his family. I mean, that is a stunning public reversal. And it seemed to point the investigation squarely in one direction: an unknown intruder. So the official investigation is stalled for years. You have the Diaz public exoneration. So what happens next? The fight for the truth, it just spills out into the public arena. And it's waged through books, media appearances, and multi-million-dollar civil lawsuits. And this battle for the narrative, it literally went to court. In 2016, JonBenét's brother, Burke Ramsey, he actually sued CBS over a documentary they produced. His lawsuit accused them of a sham reinvestigation. He claimed the whole thing was scripted, that they used pseudo-experts just to act out a story they already decided on, a story that falsely pointed the finger at him. It just goes to show you the fight over public perception became just as intense as the original criminal case. And you can see the family's perspective in John Ramsey's book. He describes this feeling of being targeted right from day one. He says the police were hungry for evidence to indict us, any kind of evidence. He felt they had already made up their minds that the family was guilty, and they were just trying to find stuff to back that up, instead of seriously looking for an intruder. And all this time, the media circus just kept going, fueling all the confusion. Probably the most bizarre example of this was back in 2006, when this teacher, John Mark Carr, falsely confessed to the murder. It created a global media frenzy, but in the end, what cleared him? It was that same unidentified male DNA. It proved his story was a total lie, which, again, really highlights the power of that physical evidence. So, after all that, where does it leave us? Well, not with a nice, neat answer. Not at all. Instead, when you look at all the evidence from all the different sides, you're just kind of left stranded in this sea of huge, unresolved contradictions.
Really, it all boils down to this. You've got two completely different stories, and both of them are backed up by some kind of official evidence. On one hand, you have the intruder theory. That's supported by the powerful unknown male DNA, John's testimony about the broken window, and experts who dismissed the ransom note. But on the other hand, you have the theory pointing to the family. And that's backed by the police analysis of the handwriting, that initial report of no forced entry, and these weird circumstantial clues like the pineapple.
And that leaves us with the ultimate question, the one that's really at the heart of the JonBenet Ramsey case. And it's a question that's bigger than just this one tragedy. It's about how do we find truth? How do we get justice when the facts themselves seem to be at war with each other?